Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on composer Max Stern. Today I have with me Max, who is a composer, performer, conductor, musicologist, music critic, and educator. Max is a pioneer figure in Israel's musical life and has created a rich genre of biblical compositions blending East and West with contemporary idioms and genres, recognized for eloquence and warmth, expressive and authentic, touching the past, breaking into the future. His works have been performed at leading festivals in Europe, Asia, the United States, and Israel. Max has released over 19 CDs. Max Stern won the Israel Composers League Lieberson Prize in 1990, receiving an award of the Japanese Society for Contemporary Music in 1991, and special mention for personal language and balance between tradition and innovation from the International Epic Music Composition Prize in 2004. Dr. Stern is a founding professor emeritus of music at Ariel University. He has lectured widely at international seminars and conferences. Besides newspaper criticism and journal articles, he is author of an introduction to the theory of music entitled The Speech of Angels, which we have here, and two monumental volumes on the influence of the Bible on Western music entitled Bible and Music and Psalms and Music. And these reference works, especially Psalms and Music, are excellent for music libraries. Welcome today, Dr. Max Stern. Thank you for coming today, Max.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. I'd like to give a little introduction to my work and my background. Music is the most ancient of the arts, and even before life commenced on the earth, it was here in the wind and the waves. When men were little more than beasts, it became the most powerful medium for the expression of their emotions and influenced them for their own good. In the Bible, the first musician was Yuval, father of all who handled the harp and the ugav. Generations later, David comforted Saul with the harp. Later, after release from Egyptian bondage, we read of Moses leading the children of Israel in song and Miriam singing unto the Lord at the Red Sea with timbrels and dances. Then after entering the promised land, we encounter prophets prophesying with psaltery, tambrette, pipe, and harp, and witness Levites as sacred singers with instruments of music, lifting up their voices with joy. The shofar, our most ancient ritual instrument, still used today, was heard from on high as a divine sounding at Sinai, when the voice of the horn waxed louder and louder, while 7 shofars, blown by priests down the walls of Jericho. So the people shouted, and the priests blew with the horns, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the horn that the wall fell down. Today, shofar blasts are heard in the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, bringing our sacred heritage up to date and testifying to music's role as an eternal element, integral to Jewish experience and culture throughout the ages. The Bible tells us that in the 50th year, Yovel, shalt thou make proclamation with the blast of the horn. In the day of atonement, he shall make proclamation with the horn throughout all your land. Ukaratem dror ba'aretz, lechol yoshveha, Yovel hi tielachem. Proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants thereof. My orchestral composition, Yovel, takes its character from this passage, which is also inscribed on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. When I conducted the work with the National Symphony Orchestra of Thailand at the Asia Composers League Festival in Bangkok in 2005, I was surprised to discover that these Far Eastern musicians, so different from ourselves, were somehow able to grasp the spirit and message of the work. Meeting the players outside the concert hall after the performance, I asked, how were you able to connect to a work so different from your own experience? I will not forget their sincere and heartwarming remark. I guess it's because of the universal language of music, they said. The following video is an interview, an excerpt from that work broadcast by the Israel television. It was preceding its premiere performance in the Negev by the Israel Sinfonietta Beersheba.
מקס שטרן עלה לישראל מארצות הברית לפני 22 שנה. יצירותיו מעוררות עניין בכל העולם. באמצעות שימוש בחומרים בני זמננו הוא יוצר ז'אנר חדש של מוזיקה קלאסית מודרנית.
נגנים בתזמורת אמרו לי, אתה הכנסת רוח חדש, אנחנו לא ידענו איך להתייחס ליצירה. לקח להם 3 חזרות לשנות את הראש.
על יצירתו החדשה יובל, שאותה הלחין לכבוד יובל המדינה, חצי יובל לסינפונייטה ויובל לשחרור באר שבע, הוא אומר.
אני לקחתי מהרעיונות שלי, מהרגש שלי, לא לקחתי מלחין אחר. ועל פי ההשראה של היובל, על פי ההשראה של שופר, על פי האווירה שאני מרגיש כאן בנגב.
הסינפונייטה תבצע את היצירה במסגרת הסדרה קלאסיקל הזיקה היהודית בניצוחו של אורי מאיר. ואכן המוטיבים ביצירה קשורים ליהדות ולישראליות, דוגמת השופרות.
וזה הכלי מתכת, הם עושים זה בכל היצירה. אתה שומע טרומבון עושה טק 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 טק, חצוצרה אותו דבר, חליל צעד עושה אותו דבר.
שטרן כבר עובד על היצירה הבאה שלו, אופרה, שגם בה תשתקף הישראליות.
אני כותב את הקו הווקאלי. זה אופרה מאוד ישראלי, אני משתמש הרבה נושאים של מוזיקה עממית.
היצירות האלה שהוא מלחין, אומר שטרן, הן מודרניות וקרובות יותר לדור הצעיר. האם בזכות יצירותיו התמלאו עולמות הקונצרטים בדור הפירסינג? לא בטוח. שטרן חושב אחרת.
הנוער, הם יכול להתייחס. זה נותן לי תקווה.
Let me continue. If we read the Bible critically as just another book, then its characters and stories may also be reduced to literature, history, mythology, and perhaps even fantasy. But if we see the Bible as the Word of God, our Creator, distilled and given voice through the visions and imagination of our prophets and seers of old, then its promises and perspectives become our sacred and eternal heritage, which we endeavor to integrate into our lives and national ethos today. Here in Israel, the ingathering place of the many tribes of our people and the many threads and strands of our heritage and history, we have a unique opportunity to supplement the physical regeneration of the promised land with its spiritual embodiment through artistic expression, endowing eternal truths with new forms and styles attuned to the ethos and rhythm of our time. From 1980 to 1986, I lived with my family in a development town in the Negev. And through the window of our home in the Negev, let me show you, can see that? Through the window of our home in Yerucham, at the edge of the desert, I saw Bedouin herdsmen and Bedouin herdswomen going and coming each morning and evening with their flocks of sheep, goats, and camels, as you see here, okay? One afternoon, I took my 3-year-old daughter, Sarah, for a walk in the wadi behind our house. We followed the dry, meandering riverbed, and then suddenly we came upon 2 Bedouin women with their faces covered, sitting on a rock with their donkey. They were as startled as we were, and neither of us knew what to say nor expect of the other. As a gesture of goodwill, my little daughter, gave them a waffle, and they in turn reciprocated by offering her a ride on their donkey. The composition Goat Dance is a memoir of this period in the Negev, inspired from this simple human encounter, devoid of ideology or politics. It conjures up visions of a little goat rollicking in the desert. Wait, yeah, see. Yeah. Now, this performance takes place at a conference on Israeli music recorded at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. Okay, here we are.
You're back.
The Bible was the magnet which drew me here to this place. It was the promise of God to Abraham, which leaped at me. Zarecha eten et haaretz hazo. Unto your seed I will give this land. Do we grasp that we are the seed and the promise is our promise? This was my vision coming to Israel over 40 years ago. Throughout the past 40 years, this prophecy has remained in some way or other a guiding force and connection to the Israeli experience. Walking in its light, I found inspiration, striving to give musical voice to the biblical text, narrative, and landscape, integrating the rich worlds of European and Near Eastern Jewish traditions, which I discovered here, with the abstractions and innovations of contemporary classical music. Ha'azinu, the Song of Moses, is Moses' farewell address to the children of Israel. It was originally written for contrabass and orchestra and premiered by the Jerusalem Symphony Orchestra with world-renowned contrabass soloist Gary Carr in 1992. A few years later, upon request from a husband and wife harp and organ duo whom I met at an International Society for Contemporary Music festival in Essen, Germany, I adapted the orchestration and played it myself with them on a tour of 10 German cities. The contrabass takes on the part of the lawgiver, exhorting, reproving, justifying the ways of God to man, while the harp and organ represent the eternal witnesses of heaven and earth. Please hide us.
You can hear it.
Prophet or king from the book of Samuel was written for my students at Ben Gurion University of the Negev in 2007. It integrates both past and present, a rebellion from ancient Israel with the contemporary spirit of mass protest. Prophet or king was inspired by my students' unruly behavior in class. It was an artistic vehicle for challenging their anger and aggression towards creative ends. Its message is that spiritual leadership alone is not enough for the masses. Even though the king, after coronation, will cynically take advantage of the people to realize his own ambitions, the people reject the prophetic voice. It was a problem then and remains so to this day. Here we go. The Bereshit, or the creation of the world, gives voice to the biblical text from the perspective of an angel witnessing and commenting upon the act of creation itself. Jerusalem Post critic Uri Epstein characterized the work as an expression of exhilaration and awe in witnessing the phenomenon of creation. This video is an excerpt from the premiere performance by the Ashdod Chamber Orchestra, presented before a kibbutz audience in the General Assembly Room at Kibbutz Yavne. These 5 works, performed by professionals, students, and amateurs, both here in Israel and around the world, testify to the power of the Bible as a living source of inspiration for contemporary Israeli culture. A culture which strives somehow against all odds towards the fulfillment of our ancient prophecies and the flowering of redemption. Kumi uri kiva urech uchavod Adonai alayich sarach. Arise, shine, for your light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. That's our presentation, Judy.
Yeah, that's lovely.
I think we'll
Thank you
need
so
to,
much for the presentation and sharing all those works with us and the context in which were looking at the creation of these works. Max, I wanted a little, just for the audience who will be listening to this today. Well, I'd like to just ask you a couple of questions about your musical training and where you started your compositions and so on. If you could talk to us a little bit about that.
well, I began composing really in junior high school, but it was very simple pieces, things that were just parallel to what I was learning as a student.
Now, where was that?
This was in Valley Stream, New York.
Uh-huh.
This is Long Island. And we had a very good music department in the high school, in junior high school. And in the summers, I used to they have a summer music program there. I used to participate. And when I got into high school, I wrote a little piece for the band of the junior high school.
Oh,
And
nice.
then my teacher let me conduct it.
Oh, wonderful.
And then after high school, I continued to write here and there, and I applied to the Eastman School of Music. And then I was accepted, and I got my formal training in composition at Eastman. Before that, I did not have really any compositional formal training. I studied a little bit of harmony. I read, but as far as I performed, but as far as formal composition training, I did not have it until I got to Eastman. I studied Eastman with Samuel Adler, and I attended classes of Bernard Rogers, who was a famous composer of the older generation. And then after I graduated from Eastman, I attended Yale University for the graduate school. And the thing that interested me, that got me into Jewish music really, was a summer seminar at Great Barrington, sponsored by Ray Smoliver, called the Masters Fellows Programs for the Arts in Judaism. And there I met Robert Strasberg, and he sort of encouraged us to write Jewish music. And after I finished Yale, this was during the Vietnam War period.
And who did you study with at Yale?
I studied with a visiting composer named Alexander Gerth from England.
Mm-hmm.
And then after Yale, we had, as I say, it was a year of great turmoil in America because of the Vietnam War and the student uprisings and the civil rights.
What
And,
about what year was that?
This was 1970, 71.
Uh-huh.
And I was searching for an answer to the problems that we had as people in America and what music could do. And I discovered the Kodai method. And we had someone in New Haven that was actually trying to establish it. And they invited me to come to the first international Kodai seminar in Kecskemét, in Hungary.
Wow.
And there I went, I studied. I was offered a scholarship, Ford Foundation scholarship, to come back to America and study with the Hungarian teachers in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And that's what I did. And I was very influenced by the work of Kodai and the work he had with folk music. And later, after that, I decided that rather than becoming a Kodai teacher, I would return to New York. And I had questions in my own mind about what was my heritage? What was my heritage? Not what was the Hungarian musical heritage, what was my heritage as a Jewish person? And it led me to enroll in the Jewish Theological Seminary in the musicology or ethnomusicology class of Dr. Joanna Spector. And there I was exposed to Jewish music from the non-Western world, the Middle East. And after that, after a few years, then I made Aliyah to Israel.
And what brought you to Israel specifically? I mean, how did that come about?
Well, the philosophical part was what I said in my lecture.
Yes.
But the technical part was that I was playing in the Brooklyn Philharmonic with Lucas Force as conductor. And Lucas Force asked me if I could come to Jerusalem to play with the Jerusalem Symphony Orchestra. And I told him, all right, I'd like to thank you very much. And I said I didn't know exactly how to do that. He said, don't worry, you call up the manager of the orchestra. He gave me the number. And the manager arranged for me to go to the Sochnut in New York. And then they arranged for my Aliyah. And I flew with my contrabass to Jerusalem. And there before I left the airport, they immediately gave me a Tudat Oleh, took me on the bus to the Merkaz Klita, and I was a new immigrant in Israel. And for the next year or two, I played with the Jerusalem Symphony under Lucas Force, who was the music director also in Jerusalem. But that's how I got to Israel.
Were there a lot of symphonies or symphonic organizations in Jerusalem at that time?
No. This was the Jerusalem Radio. It was the Jerusalem Symphony. At that time, it was called the Kol Yisrael Radio Orchestra. And we did a lot of recordings, and we did broadcasts from the YMCA in Jerusalem.
Very good. Well, that takes you to coming to Israel. And then how is it that you wound up down in Beersheba for so many years?
What happened, this was a very interesting story. I had a scholarship from the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture to research Jewish folk music. And I spent a year on sabbatical from the orchestra researching Jewish folk music and writing arrangements on it. When I wanted to come back to the orchestra, before I could get back into the orchestra, I was crossing the street in the German colony, and I fell on the curb, and I broke my little finger. I couldn't play an audition.
Oh.
And then maybe a couple of weeks, a week or two later, I didn't know what to do. And Mendy Rodan, who was one of the conductors of the orchestra, and who was later received the Israel Prize, and later became the director of the Rubin Academy of Music here in Jerusalem. He asked me, he saw me, and he asked me, well, what was I doing? I said, well, I don't know. He said, he didn't know I broke my finger. So he said, why don't you come to Beersheba and play with the Beersheba Sinfonietta with me? So I had no alternative at that point because I was afraid to tell him I broke my finger. So I came and I played the season with 2 fingers rather than 3 or 4. And I got to Beersheba, and in Beersheba, I met my wife. We were married, and we lived in the Negev. We bought a house, and we moved. We lived in Beersheba. We lived in Yerucham, and we had family, we had children, and we stayed in the Negev.
No, and that's where I believe you lived when I met you.
I was teaching. I got a job after I was playing in the Sinfonietta for a few years, and then I somehow decided that thought I would. I don't know. I was offered a position at the yeshiva in Beersheba to teach the children music, to create a wind band for children in the yeshiva. And I took that opportunity, and I became a teacher of children for about 7 years. And at that point, I created a whole repertoire of music for the youth in Israel. And in the end of the 80s, I was asked to do a seminar at that. I did a seminar for the Ministry of Education on the music I wrote for the children.
That's great. And all of this time you're still composing, and were you getting these performances in Beersheba or all over the country, or how did that work?
Well, I got performances in Beersheba because I had friends there in the orchestra, and through musicians I knew, through various musicians, the soloists. I wrote other work for them, works for flute, works for piano, works for strings, and then that was performed. In the middle of all this, I did my doctorate at the University of Colorado. I came back to America. I did a doctorate at the University of Colorado. I was there for maybe 3 semesters. And then I returned to Israel, continued my work, continued composing. And that was my musical world there.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that life story with us, and I'm sure that it will have an impact when we start listening to some of the music in our class, and through going through the music. I found that there's an interesting mixture of primarily tonal music, but you do have elements of other kinds of music mixed in, as you say, different kinds of influences that maybe you studied other groups of Jews from different places and different lands other than the West that came into some of your musical composition. Is there one that you have in particular, additional composition you'd like to point out?
Well, I have, these were just excerpts. What you saw on the film were just excerpts. These are not the whole compositions.
Not the entire length. Some of them are long.
Much longer. I have things that are the Ha'azinu, for example, is half an hour long. It's not, and it was also performed by orchestra. But I think that I was influenced by the Jewish communities that I lived with, which is Yemen, Jewish community of Yemen. And when I was in Beersheba, a community of Tunis and Morocco. These were, I did research with the late Professor Uri Shavit, I wrote some music for him for his conservatory that he had in Alon Shvut. But much of the influence was actually living with the people and hearing their music in the synagogue, in the home, in the community, and absorbing the music, absorbing it as a, wouldn't say not so much as an objective scholar from the outside, but as someone who was, for want of another society, that was the world I was in. It's not like Jerusalem here. It's not like Jerusalem. We have a big Western community, nor Tel Aviv. It was really an ethnic community in Beersheba and Yerucham. So the studies I did with the Yemenites in Jerusalem when I first came to Israel, and then the world of the synagogue and the community in Yerucham and Beersheba, they influenced me in some way. I don't know exactly how. It became sort of just this was the what happens when you come to Israel.
You certainly get a mixture of music from, Jews that came from everywhere and have all kinds of backgrounds and influences on them, as well as contemporary Western music, popular music, and so on, as well as Middle Eastern music coming into Israeli culture in so many different levels. Well, that'll be, all of the time we have for today, although I plan to continue talking about your music further. And I really appreciate you talking to us and sharing those films with us and sharing some of your life story and studies, your music. And we're going to be hearing a lot more music as the time goes on. And I hope people will be very interested to hear this contemporary classical music and live composers today, what they're doing and what they've been up to, and sharing that with our group.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for this. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with us. It's just terrific.
Okay.